Apache Cassandra is a distributed database management system designed for low latency replication, and in this video I'll show you how to set up Apache Cassandra on your own server. We'll see how to deploy it across multiple data centers and how to give your users a seamless experience by setting up this database across multiple data regions. Let's move on to a computer screen and let's get started. Alright guys, so I'm inside of my computer screen and today we are going to install Apache Cassandra across multiple data centers. So the idea is that we'll have different VPS and we want to install Apache Cassandra on all those VPS, and all these Apache Cassandra instances are going to work collaboratively. So we'll see how this is done. Before that, let me give you a brief introduction of what is Apache Cassandra. So it's a distributed database designed for low latency replication across geographically remote data centers. So let us say I have a data center in London and anybody else is having a data center in say Australia, and there is another data center which is located in United States. I want all these data centers to work collaboratively such that they are serving my users, and my users in United States are being served by the data center of United States, and my server of India is serving users of India, and my server of say Australia is serving users of Australia, such that they receive very low latency and they basically get very good user experience on my app or my website or whatever this database is connected to. So it's open source, which is cherry on the cake. It's NoSQL database and it was originally built at Facebook. So Facebook used to do this low latency stuff a lot, and Facebook actually introduced this database such that their low latency tasks could be handled with ease. Now Cassandra uses a special query language which is called CQL. It stands for Cassandra Query Language. Like most NoSQL languages, SQL is simpler, it's very easy to use, and it is very easy to get guidance online related to CQL. If you search for an error, a lot of people have answers in the forums and they will talk about all these questions which you might ask. So let us say you have a problem with Apache Cassandra not inserting data in your database. You can actually Google search, and there is a good chance that somebody else might have the same problem and their issue must have been solved, and you will see the solution. So let's do one thing. Let's install Apache Cassandra on 3 different servers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a Linode inside Chicago. So let's say this Linode is inside Chicago. I'll choose Ubuntu 22 LTS. And let's choose Ubuntu 22. Now, one important thing to mention is that your instances or nodes must have at least 4 gigs of RAM. And why am I saying this? If you see this, Cassandra recommends at least 4 GB of memory for all the nodes. Okay. So let's select this Linode 4 GB and let's name this as node 1. Okay. So I'm labeling this as node 1. I'll choose a password and I'll click create Linode. And before that, let me add a dash here because spaces are not allowed in node names. This Linode is going to be provisioned soon, and as this Linode is provisioning, I will create another one and I'll wait for this one to provision. So let's repeat the same steps. Create Linode, then I'm going to select Ubuntu 22, but this time I will choose the location of my server to be at Amsterdam, or let's choose something else. Let's choose Sydney. I'll choose shared CPU, then I'll choose Linode 4 GB and let's label it as node 2. So this is going to be my node 2 and I'll call it SD, which is Sydney. Let's choose a root password. While I'm demonstrating here, I choose very weak root passwords, but it is strongly recommended that you choose your password very carefully. It has to be strong. It should not be guessable, because these days hackers will do anything to get into your machines and you'll have to take care of that. Let's click create Linode and the second machine is being provisioned. Let's now provision the third machine, and for this I'll simply select Ubuntu 22 LTS and let's choose India this time. So Chennai, India. Let's make it Mumbai because I use Linodes in India a lot and Mumbai data center tends to work really good for me. Let's click on Linode 4 GB and let's label this as node 3 and let's choose a root password. Let's click on create Linode, and 3 machines are now being provisioned. And this is the guide which I'm going to follow to install Cassandra across all 3 nodes. Before that, let's do one thing. Let's open terminal. You can right click on your Windows icon. If you are on Mac, you know how to open terminal. Simply open the terminal. And I'm going to create 3 tabs. This is my second tab. This is my third tab. And each tab will correspond to different nodes. So my first tab will give me SSH access to my first node. I'll type yes, and then I'll type password. I'll wait for my Linode to provision. It might take some time, but again, it's pretty fast. Let's copy this and let's paste it here. And I'll repeat the same steps. Yes, and then I'll type my password. And yes, I'm logged in. And let's do the same for the third machine. It's still provisioning, so we'll have to give it some time. It's always recommended to give your machine some time, because at times what happens is that your machines are not provisioned and you are trying to do stuff. Sometimes it might not have been boot up completely and you might face difficulties in installing software. So if you are using marketplace, you might run into issues. So to avoid all these issues, you must ensure that your machine is provisioned. This time my machine was not provisioned, which is why it showed me connection refused. And you'll have to wait for your machine to provision. And as you can see, now it says, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Which means that this machine is responding, and I can type yes, and then my root password, and I'm inside this machine. So I have these 3 machines open. And let me tell you one thing, that this first command, which is update and upgrade, which basically updates the system, it takes some time. So let's paste this command here. Let's do the same here, and let's do the same here as well. So I have run this command across 3 machines. These are 3 different machines. And yes, it is going to take some time. So in the meantime, we'll go to the documentation and we'll see what we are going to do next. The next step is going to install JRE. We will install JRE inside this machine. So Java is basically required to run Cassandra, and OpenJDK 11 is something that they recommend. So let's install it. I'll copy this command, keep this command ready in my clipboard. And once my system updates, I'm simply going to paste it. It has updated 58%, 66%, nice, good progress. And let me tell you one thing, these 3 are different independent machines which have no correlation with each other. Let's press enter. And through Cassandra, I'm basically going to organize 3 machines. Let me show you Cassandra. Now I'll show you what is a rack in Cassandra and what is a node in Cassandra. Okay, so I got a very beautiful image here. So this is a cluster. An Apache Cassandra cluster contains multiple data centers. And a data center in Cassandra can contain different racks. And a rack is nothing but collection of nodes. As you can see in this image, a cluster contains 2 data centers. This data center has a rack which has 5 nodes, and this again has 5 nodes, and same goes for the other 3 racks. I hope you now understand what rack is. We'll keep on pressing enter in these 3 machines so that everything is configured. It is asking me to restart the machine. It's a good idea to restart the machine, but I'll not do that because I can still install my JRE. Let's do the same here. So let's press enter once again, and let's run this command. I'm going to say yes, I want to install JRE, same for this machine, and I'm going to press enter and issue this command here as well. It might be a good idea to update this guide and add a -y at the end, such that it doesn't prompt me that do you want to install JRE or not. Now they are saying that it's optional to install JDK as well, but again, we don't need JDK for Cassandra. Now let's copy this command, and this command basically uses apt, and we are preparing apt to install Cassandra. Let's wait for everything to run smooth. Keep on pressing enter when you see these prompts. And yes, now we are going to add this to our package index. Let's paste this, let's paste this, and now this command will actually add our trusted keys. Okay, so let's wait for everything to finish, and it will download Apache Cassandra, and it will basically add the keys. Okay, now let's update as this guide is suggesting, and I'm doing the same for all 3 machines. I will have to prepare all 3 machines, and after that we'll install Cassandra. So let's install Cassandra now. apt-get install Cassandra. Let's do the same for second machine, and yes, it is asking me to free the space. We already have a lot of space on this machine, but again, in case you haven't got the space freed up, it is saying that 48.3 MB is required. It is downloading Apache Cassandra. Internet speed is pretty impressive. Nice. Let's press OK, enter twice and enter twice. And yes, Apache Cassandra is installed. Let's see the status of Apache Cassandra across 3 machines. This is the status. I don't have to check the status of Cassandra, but let's do that. Let's do that because I want to make sure that Cassandra is running before I start to work with Cassandra. Okay. All right. So it's saying that Cassandra has started. Now you can issue this CQLSH, which is a shell where you can issue SQL commands. It's different from SQL because it's Cassandra query language. SQL is structured query language, and the syntax is different. Just in case you don't know that, let's paste it and it should run. And yes, it runs, and I don't have to check the same in the other 2 machines. That's totally fine. Now this step is important. We are basically allowing all the ports such that these 3 connections can be made. These 3 nodes need to be connected, and we want to make sure that all the ports required to do the same are open. And you see this sudo ufw allow open SSH. This is to allow SSH connections to the machine, because if we don't do that, we are going to lose access to this machine, and we don't want that. Let's press Y and enter, and let's do the same here. And we are going to say, yes, we have already taken care of SSH. So we are good. And let's do the same here. We have already taken care of SSH and we are good. All right, so let's check the status of firewall, and we don't have to do this across all the 3 machines, but I just want to show you that all these settings have actually activated. So let's now stop Cassandra. Why are we stopping Cassandra? By the way, we are stopping Cassandra because we want to change some settings and we want to connect these 3 nodes. Okay, let's press enter. Let's do the same here. It takes some time for Cassandra to stop, and yes, it has stopped. Now Apache Cassandra, when installed, comes with some test data, and we don't want that. We don't want the test data. So we are going to copy this command, and we are going to remove the test data. As you can see, I'm removing test data across all the 3 machines, and the test data resides in this directory, which is var/lib/Cassandra, and we are deleting everything inside this directory. I hope this is clear. Now we are going to edit the first file, which is the cassandra.yaml file. And let's open this file across all the 3 machines. Now here's a thing. The cluster name has to be same. This cluster name is basically representing this cluster. As you can see, a cluster can have multiple data centers, and a data center can have multiple racks, and a rack can in turn have multiple nodes. And we are configuring this. So this image is actually very important. If you see this image, you are going to understand what I'm doing. Let's come back to this file, and they have provided a sample file where you need to update the seeds. Let's go back to this file. I'm going to press Ctrl W to search, and I'll search for seeds. As you can see, I can find the seeds here. And instead of typing localhost :7000, I'll paste the IP of this machine, and it has to be comma separated with port 7000. So I'll paste it here. This is the first machine IP. Then we'll add the second machine IP and :7000. This is second machine IP and :7000. And then we'll add the third machine IP :7000. And the seeds have been configured. Let's copy, and we'll press Ctrl X and then Y and then enter. This will save. Okay, and let's search for seeds here. We'll do the same thing here. Seeds, and instead of typing it again and again, I'll paste it from my clipboard. Ctrl X, Y and enter. Let's do the same thing here. We'll press Ctrl W, then we'll type seeds, press enter, and then we are simply going to use backspace and copy this. Ctrl X, Y, enter to save. Now this is shortcut for Nano. If you're using Vim, the shortcuts are different. And if you are comfortable with Vim, you should use Vim. I was comfortable with Nano because this guide was using Nano. It was easy for me to copy paste commands, but it is not going to make any difference. Now, this listen address needs to be changed. This is very tricky. If you forget this, your Cassandra cluster is not going to work. So let's do that. We are going to open the same file and then we'll search for listen. There should be listen address somewhere. This is the listen address, and this listen address should be the IP of this node. Now, I want to mention a very important point here, that do not put 0.0.0.0 here. If you're coming from Flask or Django, I see a lot of people making this mistake. They put 0.0.0.0. That's totally wrong. You don't want to do that. Your cluster is not going to work. Plus, you'll not know that why your cluster is not working. So you are going to run into issues. So let's press Ctrl X, Y, and enter. Let's do the same for other two nodes. Ctrl W, listen address, listen_add. Okay, let me remove this localhost from here, and let's copy the IP address of second node, and let's paste it. Ctrl X, Y, enter to save. So let's do the same for third machine. Ctrl W, we'll search for listen. We'll copy the listen address. And let's put the address here. Ctrl X, Y, enter. Okay. So this 1551 was the address of node 3. This was IP address of node 2, and this was IP address of node 1. Now let's come back to the guide. And as you can see that this file contains the configuration for the cluster. Now we are going to change the rack properties. And to change the rack properties, we will have to run this command. And let's search for the data center and rack name. So I'm naming this as rack 1. So this is a data center, DC1. We'll have to keep this same if we want to define one logical data center. So I'm defining a cluster and one logical data center, which is DC1. And I'm going to define two racks, rack 1 and rack 2. So let me say rack 1. And now let me press Ctrl X to exit. And this time here, I'll configure rack 2 and I'll call it rack 2, Ctrl X, Y, enter. And this one I'll keep the same, rack 1. Okay. Now let's come back to this guide, and they have defined a data center called London, and then there is another data center and it has another rack. Then the third one is data center Singapore, and rack is rack 1. Okay, cool. So they have done that. I can actually do the same. I can change the data center here. Let me call this as Singapore. Okay, Ctrl X, Y, enter. And after all this is done, let's start Cassandra. So this is how you start Cassandra. I'm going to do this across all the 3 machines. And then we are going to use this command to check the status of our nodes. So node tool is a command which is used to check the status. Now there is one catch here, that if you try to copy this command and paste it here, and if you try to run it, you'll get a Java error. And the source of this Java error is basically the cluster. Your cluster has not yet started. So you have to wait for your cluster to start. Okay, let's keep this command ready. Let me see if this is ready. It's not ready yet. So let's wait for it. Now, as you can see, if I try to run node tool status here, this is going to show me the status, and it is basically telling me that what % of this node or the load is owned by this node. Okay, so let me run the node tool once again. And as you can see that this load is visible here. Now you can always go and start running your SQL queries using CQLSH. If I issue CQLSH, I can run all these queries, and all 3 nodes are logically connected now. So what do you think about Cassandra? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you like this video. Thank you so much guys for watching this video, and I will see you next time.